A deal on Dickens, who could resist? A stack of Austen, warmly kissed. Golden Age crime tales twist and turn, every page a treasure to learn. Books keep coming home with me, piles so tall they're all I see. Turn a page and sail the sea, reading always feels so free.
Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. Just trying to get a couple of book reviews in while I'm still feeling up to recording them. Who knows when they'll actually go up. But want to go ahead and at least, talk about a few things. Well, like I said, I feel like doing it. So the first, or actually this will be the second one that I'm recording right now. This is for Red, White, and June. This is Treacherous Beauty, Peggy Shippen, the woman behind Benedict Arnold's plot to betray America, by Mark Jacob and Stephen H. Case. I actually was only familiar with the Shippen name when it relates to Dr. William Shippen, who I had been introduced to in the book about Dr. Benjamin Rush. And he and Dr. Benjamin Rush had a bit of beef. A lot of times, Dr. Shippen would be preferred to by Washington over Dr. Rush. Washington traveled in the same social circles as the Shippens. Rush wasn't in that same societal, didn't travel the same social circle in quite the same extent. The Shippens were quite wealthy and just they were in Washington's social circle. Now, Rush had other issues with Washington, but the definite favoritism toward Dr. Shippen was one of them. So that was mostly my experience with the Shippen name. Apparently, there was a tendency towards Toryism, if not, overt Toryism. At least some tendencies towards it for this particular branch of the Shippen family. So Peggy was Benedict Arnold's wife, so as this kind of implies. And what I thought this book did, while it was open about its thesis, they wanted to present the case that Peggy Shippen was not the naive and completely, caught by surprise, innocent young wife of a traitor that that Washington and Hamilton and quite a few of the founding fathers believed. This particular book uses sources such as Aaron Burr, who wrote at the time and who had reason to believe that Peggy was not as completely innocent as she appeared to Washington, who was inclined to give her the benefit of the doubt because of his long attachment to the family. So, he was already biased in that direction. And Peggy Shippen also was known to be a beauty, and she had turned both Alexander Hamilton and Lafayette's heads. So they weren't necessarily going to be the most unbiased in her when it came to her anyway. So these authors do a good job, I think, of, while being clear about what their thesis of the book is, I don't feel like they come across as overly biased. I feel like they do a good job of presenting why a young woman like Peggy, living in Pennsylvania, whose best, years of her of her teenage years were when the English were occupying Philadelphia. I don't know if I said Boston earlier. I meant to say Philadelphia if I did. So for her, that was the best period of time. There were parties. There were, it was the glitz and the glamour. And she was very much treated like a belle. And she was always gadding about, even though it did not do much for her popularity among those outside of her social circle, because there were the regular people who were even struggling to afford food, and she and her friends were out gadding about, having lavish parties and stuff. And it was also, you know, her partying and stuff was not great for her father's finances either. But I think that the book does a great job of presenting why, in the atmosphere at that point, why she might have been inclined with her good experiences when the British had occupied Philadelphia, plus her attraction to John Andre, her friends who were Tories, because she did have friends who were Tories and who were quite vocally Tory, and her father's own kind of like not willing to commit one way or another, where you could tell his sympathies are probably more Tory, but he really didn't want to be on either side. So everything was set up to show how it made sense that maybe she took the direction that she did. A good portion of the book, I want to say a good half of the book, is setting up her before she even meets Benedict Arnold, because she doesn't end up marrying Benedict Arnold until after, you know, the British leave Philadelphia, and until after he has his injury to the leg that leaves him pretty much lame. He's already getting to be embittered by the time he meets her. And I think the book does a good job of showing how, yes, both of them loved lavish things, and he felt that he needed to show that he could afford to keep her in style in order to win her. But also, both of them felt that they had been treated badly by those who were for the revolution. So he felt that he was treated unjustly, that he was being persecuted. He felt that he wasn't being paid as he ought, wasn't being recognized as he deserved. And she not only felt that for him, but she also felt that she and her friends were kind of treated as social pariahs because of the fact that they were in that group of women who had hobnobbed with the British when they were there, and who had taken part in these extravagant parties. So she had that mark against her, and so was kind of treated accordingly. So both of them felt a level of disgruntlement, as well as just, you know, feeling a bit of a desperation for money. So this book does a good job of making case where that both of them had their reasons that eventually led them to make the choices. I had an alarm go off. But the other thing this book does a good job of making a case for is that John Andre, the British spy master who was Benedict Arnold's point of contact, was Peggy Shippen's friend. Benedict Arnold had no contact with John Andre before that point. John Andre knew Peggy and had been writing to Peggy. So it's not outside the realm of possibility that Peggy would have been the one to introduce the two. Some cases are made, a good case is made for just showing that she was very savvy. She was very intelligent. She was not the type to be kept in the dark. She wanted to be kept abreast of things going on with him, and her letters do reflect that. And a lot of the things that are being sourced in this are I want to see if I have a bibliography as well as my chapter notes. Yeah, so we have, of course, John Adams as a source, of course, but you have books about Andre, Life of Benedict Arnold, some of the letters here there are communications between Peggy and her husband. There's letters from her father. They're just a lot of primary sources, as well as sources that use primary sources, are used by this book. This bibliography is pages upon pages of books and sources, which is awesome. I felt that this book did a good job of it didn't feel like it was trying to pull on the heartstrings one way or another. One of the biggest sources I mentioned for that, yes, they explained all the reasons why Peggy and Benedict could have made their decisions. But I thought one of the more convincing cases made of Peggy being in the know was, yes, it's Benedict Arnold, and you can argue whether or not Benedict Arnold, it was Burr. It was Aaron Burr. You can argue whether or not you would choose to believe Aaron Burr, but Aaron Burr was and eventually got married to a woman whose husband was British. The guy eventually died. Now, Burr was involved with her before the guy died, but Theodosia. And apparently Peggy, according to Burr, after Benedict Arnold is revealed to be a traitor, and Peggy has convinced Washington, Hamilton, Lafayette, a bunch of people that she was innocent of anything to do with her husband's treachery. When she's headed back home to Philadelphia, she's not allowed to stay. They don't want her there. They don't believe her. They send her to be home with her husband. They send her to England. She never actually returns to the States for more than a visit after that, and she only returns once more. It just is not a pleasant experience for her. But she apparently unloads herself to Theodosia and says, "Oh, I'm so glad not to have to, put on this false face in front of you," basically implying that she was fully aware of what her husband did. Let me see if I can find the exact quote. There it is. So, if Burr's memoirs are to be believed, Peggy felt comfortable enough with Prevost to unburden herself to admit that she'd been putting on a show. And here's the quote. As soon as they were left alone, Mrs. Arnold became tranquilized and assured Mrs. Prevost, Theodosia, that she was heartily sick of the theatrics she was exhibiting, Burr recalled. She stated that she had corresponded with the British commander, that she was disgusted with the American cause and those who had the management of public affairs, and that through great persuasion and unceasing perseverance, she had ultimately brought the general into an arrangement to surrender West Point to the British. Now, the Shippens have always tried to claim that actually no, Peggy was victimized by Burr, but and that he told nothing but lies. But letters that between Andre and Arnold don't really support their narrative that everything Burr said was a lie, and that therefore it sounds almost more like the Shippens were trying to blacken Burr. Like, yes, Burr did plenty on his own to blacken his own reputation, but they were hoping to go like, no, anything that he says against Peggy, it's only because, he's trying to cover up his own wrongdoing. But when you look at, there's letters provided where Andre and Arnold are writing, and they're referencing Peggy passing on their communications, and in such a way that she's writing, her writing is to contain information in it. And some of the writings that Arnold wrote to his wife were so detailed, like he obviously expected her to pass on that information when he couldn't. So the way that Andre and Arnold communicated don't back up the Shippens' claims that everything that Burr claimed about Peggy being treacherous was, just him trying to blacken her name. Previous other communications support his claim over theirs, which almost sound like theirs is more reactionary to his, if that makes any sense. So in and of itself, I had already thought that I enjoyed this book, even though I was like, well, you could argue one way or another whether or not these authors are biased, but I felt like they gave a good support for their theory between Andre and Arnold's letters about the fact that Andre was Peggy's friend, that Peggy had reason to personal and, otherwise, financial, etc., why she would choose to go British instead of American. And so I thought they supported their argument well. And the reason why I keep emphasizing this is also reading another book. After I finished Treacherous Beauty, I started The Tragedy of Benedict Arnold, American Life. This book came out a little bit before Treacherous Beauty. So the Treacherous Beauty came out in 2012. I think this one came out after. Maybe this Benedict Arnold came out. Let's see when Benedict Arnold actually came out. Oh, I'm sorry. This one came out after 2018. But this author this author feels like she is trying to manipulate your emotions to make you feel for, even before you meet Peggy, to feel for Arnold. And I'm not arguing that Arnold had things that happened in his life that were unfortunate, and that, I don't even say that he was necessarily a horrible person his entire life. But I feel like this author very much is trying to manipulate your emotions to make you sympathize with Arnold. And a lot of the sources that she seems to be using are more pro-Arnold, like family members, descendants of his, or books that are definitely aimed at telling more of a pro-Benedict Arnold narrative. And you could rightfully argue that the Peggy Shippen book is presenting an anti-Peggy Shippen argument. I would argue that it's basing their theory upon some pretty well-supported, they support their argument well. I'm not terribly convinced so far about, and we'll see if they do a better job by the time I get to that point, but this book is trying to claim that Peggy is completely innocent, the way that Washington and Hamilton and Lafayette believed her to be. I would argue that Andre's and Benedict Arnold's letters don't support that. So I'm interested in seeing how this book gets around the communications of Andre and Benedict Arnold, especially since they're doing since this author is trying so hard to make Benedict Arnold seem sympathetic. You can't really have Benedict Arnold be sympathetic and then have it, the fact that he's mentioning his wife in his letters with Andre, and then claim that she was completely naive of it. Either, like, you almost would have to have him, like, her be innocent and him trying to make her seem not innocent, or she's in on it too. I don't think you can have him be a good guy and bring her into it when she's into his letters if she was innocent. I don't know. I think if that makes any sense. I think that this is not going to be a book I'm going to thoroughly enjoy while I'm reading. I'm going to finish it. I probably will still keep it because it was kind of hard to get a hold of. But this author is definitely biased. And I feel like their bias is almost more emotionally based and almost one of those things where you feel that it's almost contrarianism to a certain extent. I don't know. That might be my bias showing. But I almost feel like they want so badly for him to... And I'm not arguing that he was never treated poorly, but I do also think, like, you know, when some of the things he did, you know, some of the things were a reaction to his actions. Now, some of it, he was treated in a way that he could have probably been treated better. But he wasn't alone, and Washington was not treated terribly well sometimes by the the congressional body either. And I don't feel that Arnold's complaints were that much more founded than Washington's were. So this author in Benedict Arnold's book is going to have to do a really strong job to counteract what was laid down so well in Treacherous Beauty. I enjoyed this book. I felt that this book did a good job of convincing me of its argument, and I'm interested in seeing if the Benedict Arnold book can counteract the arguments made by this book, because they're arguing completely different things. This book argues for Peggy's complete innocence. This book argues against Peggy's complete innocence. This book argues that Peggy was completely in on it. But the other one argues for complete innocence, and you can't have both be true at once. So I'm interested in seeing if the other book can change my mind. It will have to work very hard to, because already it's kind of starting off on the wrong foot for me, because it feels so incredibly biased, and I don't like a book that feels like it's trying to make me feel sorry for Benedict Arnold. And I feel like, okay, yes, it's sad, some of the things that happened, but I sometimes feel like the sources that they're pulling from have a reason to try to make him feel more sympathetic, and then also some of it is just the author's own bias showing. Sometimes it's not something that she supports well, I feel. Sometimes it feels like she's pulling off of her own feelings and her own opinions, and she really, really, really wants the reader to feel that. Whereas I did feel that while these authors for Treacherous Beauty had their opinions going in, I felt that they were looking at the evidence and then using the evidence to promote their thesis. Like their evidence supports their thesis, I feel, quite strongly. So the Benedict Arnold book is going to have to do some heavy lifting to try to push past what this book presents. This book is a great introduction to Benedict Arnold. If you are just wanting to get to know him, I do think that it is good to go from there to read a Benedict Arnold book. I don't know if I'd recommend this Benedict Arnold book, but I think also it is a good place to start with a John Andre introduction. And he seems like he was an interesting person. A bit arrogant, but interesting. You do have some nice artwork in here, including John Andre's drawings. I'm trying to find one of John. I think one of John Andre's drawings of Peggy marked, I think. Yeah, so here's one of John Andre's portraits of Peggy. he was apparently quite a charismatic character himself. But yeah, this was a very interesting book. Well written, I felt, well researched, and well supporting its arguments that makes well. So I would recommend this. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. Let's see, what else did I write? No, I think that was everything I have about this book. I've had this book for a while. I'm glad that I finally read this. I have a feeling that I'm going to want to return to this one sooner than I'll want to return to the Benedict Arnold one, because I'm kind of forcing myself through the Benedict Arnold one, because the author is not convincing me the way that these authors convinced me in Treacherous Beauty. Anyway, that's it for me for this book. Have you heard of Peggy Shippen? If you have, are you of the camp where you believe, like Washington and Hamilton and Lafayette, that she was completely innocent? And that's one of the things that this book actually also emphasizes, the fact that during that time period, women were not believed to be capable of necessarily that, like, she would not have been believed to be capable of that treachery. It was a lot easier for the men in her life to believe that she was completely naive and innocent than to believe that she could possibly be capable of this. And there was reason to believe that she had used, fits of hysteria in the past as a manipulative method. Now, there were points where I thought they emphasized that a bit too much, but I could also see their argument about how the culture did set up Peggy, even though she didn't have a level of independence as a lot of the men did. She was held to a different, standard. She wasn't thought to be, capable of what her husband was capable of. And so they were more inclined to believe her if she put on an act of innocence. And Washington already was friends with her family. I had already seen in a previous book that he could show actually quite a bit of favoritism toward the Shippens. So I was not shocked at the idea that if Peggy Shippen wanted to put on a face of innocence, that Washington would believe her, because I had already seen in Dr. Benjamin Rush's book that Washington had shown favoritism towards her cousin, Dr. Shippen, who was actually kind of an obnoxious character himself, in my opinion. Now, granted, I'm biased towards Dr. Benjamin Rush, and my view of Dr. Shippen is through Benjamin Rush's eyes, because that's what that book was focused on. But, so I think that the book does a good job of pointing out, how the societal expectations for Peggy did also put her in a position of being able to convince some highly placed men of her innocence, and how who she was helped her a lot because of who Washington was and his, connection with her family. So I thought that was all interesting and well supported. Anyway, I think I'm beating a dead horse. Do you have an opinion of Peggy Shippen? If you had heard of Peggy Shippen before this, do you have an opinion of how much she was or was not involved in her husband's treachery? I personally am not sure how much I believe that she was the inciting. Like, I don't know how much she might have been. I think that she was a partner. I don't know how much she was I don't know that she was like pushing him into it. I think that once he made the decision, she definitely supported him. I don't know that we have enough evidence to point one way or another. And these authors don't try to claim that we have enough evidence one way or another that show that she pushed him into that decision. But they do present the argument that either or could be true, that she encouraged him or that she just once he made the decision, was his partner. I can see either happening, to be quite honest with you. But because he was kind of in a more volatile personality, and his circumstances, really everything lined up with him making the decision that he did. But yeah, so I'm interested in seeing where people land on whether or not think Peggy was innocent or not, if they're already aware of Peggy. If you're not aware of Peggy, I do recommend checking out Treacherous Beauty. I'm sure there's other books about her out there that cover more of an idea of her innocence. But yes, that's it for this book review. Hope that you got something out of it. I've really enjoyed reading this for Red, White, and June. I will probably continue to read Revolutionary War books continuing into next quarter 3 of Historathon, just because, we are at the 250th anniversary of our country, and it just seems like a great way to continue down this Revolutionary War rabbit hole that I'm going down. So, great read. Hope that you all have a blessed day, and I will see you the next time. God bless. Bye.
Books keep coming home with me, piles so tall they're all I see. Turn a page and sail the sea. Reading always feels so free.